Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Same idea in the PTAC report that just came out on supercomputing. It goes back, I think people started making this observation about a decade ago. The basic story is that science has evolved from an empirical phase through an analytic phase and now has a computational leg, so that if you go to almost any department, be it ecology or linguistics or chemistry, you'll have a theoretical branch, an empirical branch, or actually I should really say an empirical branch, which was started with alchemy, a theoretical branch, which is models of chemical bonds, and now a computational branch. So there'll be computational chemistry or computational ecology. And a surprising thing to me is that the empirical guys have been benefiting from Moore's law the same way that the computational guys have. And so both the computational scientists and the empirical scientists are facing a data avalanche. And much of their energy goes into dealing with the vast amount of information that they can collect and analyze. So the sort of big picture that one ends up with is a situation where you have a scientist who's got a bunch of experiments and instruments, and they have a laboratory information management system, a LIMS, that is producing quite a bit of data. They're getting data from many other experiments and many other archives. They've, of course, got the literature, and then they have the computational models. And all these things feed into, hopefully, an information store that they spend much of their time dealing with. So to first approximation, you think of scientists looking in Petri dishes or looking through telescopes. That's the way it used to be. These days, they largely are looking at an LCD and dealing with most of this information through the medium of a computer. And the problems they face are the data ingest problem, getting the stuff into the computer. That is a nuisance, but it's not the hardest problem they face. Once they've got it, just managing it. And having a schema for the data so that they can take that information and share it with their colleagues. And conversely, having a schema so that they can understand what their colleagues' information is. And so convolving your data with my data is a non-trivial problem. And just organizing the information and coexisting and cooperating with others. Again, one of the big surprises to me is that in many projects, a quarter to a half of their budget goes into software. I'm involved with the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, and they have this very impressive telescope down at Apache Point, New Mexico. And you go down there and you drive, and there's this facility, and there are a dozen people operating this telescope, and there's this great big building and so on. And the net cost of this was about $15 or $20 million. The net cost of the software that went into the Sloan is on the books $15 or $20 million. And that doesn't count all the programming the astronomers did. Okay? So easily half the budget for the Sloan is software. Okay? And arguably it could be more than that. Okay? And most of the software, Ani Thakur is here. He's also from the Sloan. He'll be talking. Most of that software, Ani has been talking about a batch job scheduling system. They built that batch job scheduling system themselves. Okay? Why on earth are astronomers building batch job schedulers? They built a pipeline and a workflow system to take the pixels and turn it into a database. And all that software has been built again and again and again in the astronomy community and is being built across many, many different communities. So, challenge for I think the computer science folks is to, build common software base. And I think that's what grid computing is largely about, what it should be about at least, is building a common software base for scientists so that they don't have to rewrite these core utilities. Okay? And another thing that is going on is that the way the publication of data and the publication of the literature and the interaction between the data and literature happens is changing fairly dramatically. In the old days, you'd put your experimental data in the back of the paper. Science magazine stopped publishing DNA sequences in the, I guess, was it the mid-'80s? Because there were issues of science that were about that thick, and most of it was just a DNA sequence. And the notion that anybody would read that was crazy. And so along came GenBank, and you throw your stuff into GenBank, and you have a citation to the GenBank entry. So the data is going into the internet. And there is now this beautiful linkage between the data and the literature. And you can point to a galaxy in the Sloan and find all the other data sets that reference this galaxy. It's cross-indexed. And you can find all the literature about that galaxy. And you can find all the literature about galaxies like that galaxy. Okay? And ditto for genomes. Ditto for proteins. Ditto for molecules. So traditionally, you had authors who sent their things to journals, and you had libraries that curated them, and the things went into archives, and they were consumed by scientists. Well, the emerging thing is that individuals actually are collaborations that gather the data. They actually build a website. When the project ends, the website goes off to some sort of archive. And this is very, very fuzzy. And this is kind of a mess as well. And it is the case that scientists are still the consumers. But one of the things that's interesting, at least in medicine, and it may be happening in other places, is that if you have an unusual disease and you go to the doctor, you go back, you check the internet. The next time you talk to the doctor, you know more about the disease than the doctor does. Because it's an exotic disease, and the doctor, by and large, unless he's a specialist in that field. And so the National Library of Medicine has mandated something called taxpayer access, which is that all NIH-sponsored research, the research reports are supposed to go onto the internet within a year of the publication, I think 6 months of the publication. And I think in general, all science literature is going to go into the public domain in the next decade. How exactly is that going to work? Okay? How exactly, who's going to build that library? And who's going to manage that library? And who's going to cross-index it? That's one of the more exciting things that's going on right now. And so the consumers are scientists, but they're not just your domain scientists. They're scientists from all the domains. And, of course, people just people who are especially interested in a topic. There's this great line, which is that it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Computers are great at looking for needles in haystacks. People are not. A computer can pick up a piece of straw and say, is it a needle, in a microsecond. On the other hand, people are great at recognizing haystacks, and computers are terrible at recognizing haystacks. Okay? And many of the things that the astronomers are trying to do is they're looking for haystacks. And the algorithms for haystacks are cubic and quintic. They are not linear. And Moore's law, if you give me twice as much data and I have an algorithm that is quintic, it means I have to do 32 times as much work. Not a good deal. So we need new algorithms for dealing with the haystack problem. The needle problem, I think we're pretty we're in pretty good shape with needles. Okay. Alex Saleh, who's my collaborator in most of this, is a co-author on these slides, and he asked me to add the following line at the bottom, which is that many, many scientists aren't blessed with petabytes of data. They're blessed with kilobytes of data. And their tool is Excel. Okay? And there are a bunch of things like, and pivot tables in Excel are great, although almost nobody understands them. Okay? But pivot tables are the tip of the iceberg of data cubes. And there are data mining tools and data cube tools that are not widely understood in the sciences and would be a huge help. And the reason they're not widely understood is that they're a little bit hard to use. So making them easier to use and easier to understand would be a great thing. Another problem is that this needle in a haystack thing, yeah, we can grep through files pretty fast. But the standard model for science today is grep and FTP. And it would be better to have better grep, data mining, and not have to FTP things, but have the data stored in an archive and be able to get things from the archive, just exactly what you need. You've probably wondered, I certainly have, why is it that it takes seconds or minutes to search my desktop, and I can search the internet in milliseconds? Well, the answer is they've got 100,000 disk drives out there. You've got one disk drive. Okay? If you want to go through the stuff on your disk drive, it's going to take as long as it takes to read that disk. Okay? So it's better to have dedicated resources and to have lots and lots of I/O bandwidth that's used occasionally and multiplexed than to have to do it on demand. And so the style of search and of computing that we have had in the past, which is very individual, is probably not the appropriate style going forward. Every discipline is going through this embarrassing process of being asked, so just exactly what is it you do? Okay? Okay? So what is a gene? What is a star? What is a galaxy? And parenthetically, where does the galaxy end? Okay? And the corner cases just drive you crazy. But unfortunately, if we are going to have a worldwide digital library of genes, I mean, DNA is easy. It's just a sequence. That's, okay, it's wonderful. It's digital. Okay? But the minute you get to something that is a little bit higher concept, like representing bonds of molecules, and so, well, things get really thorny. And every discipline is going through the embarrassing process of trying to come up with an agreement about what it is they're talking about. Okay? And parenthetically, the people here from Microsoft are watching Microsoft going through this process. So what is a document? What is a contact? So we've got this project. Whoops, I haven't gone to the next slide. Pilot error. So there's a project called WinFS that's saying, so what's a document? What's a person? Okay. And it's painful to watch this. This stuff is going on in each field, and we're trying to come up with a controlled vocabulary. We're trying to come up with a data representation. We're trying to come up with data interchange protocols, and it's hard to watch. So, popping up. This is the world as seen by this is science as seen by computer scientists. This is not drawn to scale. This is like Steinberg's model of the world seen from Fifth Avenue. So there's science, which parenthetically is 90% or 110% of the planet, and there's computer science. Okay? The computer scientists are really, if you're a scientist, you may find this hard to grasp, we are divided into camps. And there are people who are data mining people who know a lot of statistics and know a lot of algorithms, and they are quite different from, I used to call them plumbers, but I did some plumbing this weekend, and I was reminded how unpleasant it is. And but there are systems people who store and access the data for you. And there are people who are especially good at visualization. And we're talking about the data cube problem earlier. The data cube plumbing is in place. The problem is just exactly how do normals get to it? What's an easy way of using the data mining tools? And we, again, are struggling with that. But there are these, if you are putting together a project, you need people from each of these three parts of the puzzle. If you just have systems people, you're in trouble. If you just have visualization people, or if you just have data mining people, if you just have algorithms people, you're in trouble. It takes people from all of these groups collaborating to make a successful project. And again, I've seen this with the Sloan work. We've been really light on this area. We've been pretty good in these two areas, in the algorithms area and the plumbing area. And if you go into the user interface, you'll see that deep down inside there must be good stuff, but it sure is hard to find it. Hello. Let's do that. So if you're a computer scientist, and I am, and so this is my side of the story, how can you help a discipline? And I think almost all of you are actually doing this. So this is kind of this is just my perception of how it's done. And if you have something to add to it, please tell me. You can't learn the discipline. That means just stop doing computer science and start doing bio, or stop doing computer science and start doing astro. So you can't go native. You're a CS person. Okay? So you basically have to learn how to communicate, and you have to learn the language and form a working relationship with somebody. And you have to find problems that you can help with. So my theory is that you find somebody who's desperate. Okay? Okay? That's. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, go door to door, and I show up. Oh, you're from Microsoft. We talk, and they're very polite, but they're not desperate. And so they're not willing to try something new. I mean, what they got sort of works, and so you got to find somebody who's desperate. The story with Alex was they'd been working, and Ani, they'd been working for 8 years. They'd built something, and it didn't work. I mean, it worked, but it wasn't going to solve the problem. And first light was a year away, and they were desperate. Okay? And so that allowed them to say, okay, let's try something different because we know this isn't going to work. Okay? And you look for something where if you could find a different way of doing it, you'd get a dramatic improvement in productivity. Okay? And go from working to working. Don't have a 5-year plan. Okay? Get something to show right away because, frankly, your collaborators aren't quite sure if you're real or not. And if you go for a year and say, it's going to be great, and you go for another year and say, it's going to be great, after the first year, they're going to start losing interest. And I'm being generous in saying a year. I mean, they probably put you on a much shorter leash than that because they're desperate. But, always have some clear next steps that you have to do and have a pretty clear idea of where you're headed. And avoid death by collaboration meetings. With the astronomers, I went to Garching once. I went to Garching twice. If I went to Garching again, we would have exactly the same conversation. I mean, you can talk about the same thing for 5 years in a row and never do anything. And they are still having meetings. I haven't been to one lately. Ani, is that a fair statement? To go to Garching and have the same conversation? Okay. The various VO meetings. Okay. Okay, so you might ask, why in the hell is... No, I'm over time. So why is Microsoft doing this? Well, 2 reasons. Information at your fingertips. I mentioned WinFS. We're struggling this with WinFS. Our goal is to do information at your fingertips for everybody. And it's easiest to do it in the science context because we can share, we can talk to people in universities, we can learn from you guys, you can learn from us. I mean, it's not competitive. If we were doing this at Walmart, we can't talk to Target about it, if you understand. And the astronomy story and the Walmart story are very analogous. They're very, very similar problems that they face. And the other thing is it just advances human knowledge, and that's a good thing to do. So every talk is supposed to end with a every Microsoft talk is supposed to end with a call to action, at least. So this is the ground floor for eScience. Things really are changing. I mean, you all know this, okay? And if you're a computer scientist, find someone who's desperate. And if you're a desperate scientist, find a CS buddy. And it's mostly chemistry. You have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find a prince, I think is the expression. And there are this risks, and I'll end with the error 33 story. Error 33 is making the success of your project depend on the success of another project is a big mistake because both projects have to be successful and it's a joint probability problem. So if they've got a 50% chance and you've got a 50% chance, together you have a 25% chance, right? And those are not great odds. So that's part of the risk. And so you have to find somebody who's not only desperate, but somebody who you think you can help and trust. So with that, I'm going to stop. I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to be here for the next 2 days. Rather than having questions, I think we probably should push on. So what happens next, Dan? Thank you.